I live in northern Colorado, and I attend Crossroads Church. Yes, yes. So if this is your first week at Crossroads, it is mine too. So come find me after the service, and we're going to go get our free gift together in the Welcome Center. I'm with you in that. My family and I come from a wonderful church in Houston, Texas, where we left people who we love and who we greatly miss. But this feels so good and right to be here. So thank you for your acceptance and your welcoming of me and my family. And I arrived here about 3 weeks ago, and my family stayed back in Houston for 2 extra weeks because of living situations. And so this last week, my family flew in from Houston, and I went to the airport to pick them up, and it was the first time we were reunited in 2 weeks, which is the longest we've been apart as a family. And so, of course, seconds after we were reunited, we took a Boyle selfie, and this is us at the airport. That's my bride, Corey. We've been married for 10 years. That's our 5-year-old daughter, Nylia, and our 3-year-old son, Parker, and you'll see them running around here frequently. And so my first day here at the office was Wednesday, July 5th. And I pull into the parking lot. I get out of my car, the sun's out, I'm in a good mood, I'm excited, I have my backpack on, I'm walking to the building, I have a little pep in my step, and I'm a few minutes early because I want the team here to know that I mean business, like I'm ready to go. So I walk up to the door and I pull on it, and it's locked. So I go to the next door, and it's locked. I go to the next door, and it's locked. And I try different doors around the building, all locked. And I think, oh my word, am I fired already? What did I do? Like, I know Crossroads is an at-will employer, but this is ridiculous. Like, I haven't even started yet. And at this point, I'm on the west side of the building, and I think, there's nothing to do. I might as well just turn around and stare at the pretty mountains for a while. So I turn around, look at the mountains, and trying to figure out how I'm going to explain to my bride that we have to now leave Colorado before we ever really moved in because I somehow lost my job. And a couple minutes later, I hear the door open behind me. And standing there with a grin on his face is Glenn, the fantastic facilities manager here. Yes. And Glenn runs the place, by the way, I've learned in my first 3 weeks. And Glenn has this grin on his face, and he leans out the door and he says, "How's your first day going so far?" Do you feel welcome? Today we're going to talk about anger. And last week, John started verse 4 in 1 Corinthians 13. And he said, love is patient, and he taught on that. And let me just read to you what Paul says here, starting in verse 4. Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered. This is the phrase we're going to focus on this morning. Love is not easily angered. And what's interesting here is Paul tells us something love is not. And next week I'm going to get more into why that might be. But for this week, we're going to park on this phrase, love is not easily angered. So let's get into this. The word Paul uses here for angered is the word paroxunamai. Let me hear you say paroxunamai. Yes. And it kind of sounds like a word you would yell before you would like charge at someone or go wrestle someone. But this is the word he uses. Paroxunamai. And this word is a rare word. It's only used one other time in the entire New Testament. And Paul uses it here as a passive word, which means something is being done to you. So this word means something has caused you to become angry or provoked or upset or distressed or irritable. And the only other time in the New Testament this word is used is Acts chapter 17. It's actually used about Paul when Luke writes that Paul enters the city of Athens and he is greatly distressed. He is greatly paroxunamide because the city is full of idols. It's the only other time it's used. So the NIV here translates this phrase, love is not easily angered. King James translates it, love is not easily provoked. New Living Translation says, love is not irritable. And then the New American Standard says, love is not provoked. But practically, this is what this phrase means. Love refuses to be provoked into wrong action. Love isn't triggered to a spirit of anger and bitterness. Love doesn't carry a chip on its shoulder. Love doesn't get insulted or offended. Love doesn't play psychological games. So the child who starts acting out against their parents because their parents have instituted some rules or guidelines or limits on this child's life, and this child thinks, well, that's too much. Like, I don't need all those rules. And the child acts out against these rules to show their parents that they can make their own decisions. Love doesn't do that. Or the parents who give so many burdensome rules or limits or guidelines for their child. Because their child has made one decision that the parents don't like, and so the parents think, okay, we got to show this child who's boss. So we got to load them down with all of these rules. Love doesn't do that. Or when your friend unintentionally hurts you, or they go out to dinner and they invite somebody else but don't invite you, which they're allowed to do, and you in a way feel betrayed and you immediately start plotting, okay, what can I go do and invite somebody else so they find out about it? Love doesn't do that. Or when your coworker gets the project at your work and you thought you deserved this project, you wanted this project, so you start spreading little rumors around the office how this coworker isn't very good at their job. Love doesn't do that. Or when your spouse promises that they're going to pay the bill and it totally slips their mind. They didn't not pay it intentionally, they just forgot. And now you have to pay the late fee. And you either give your spouse the silent treatment to let them know you're not very happy with them, or you straight up tell them, okay, I don't know if I can trust you anymore. Love doesn't do that. Love is not easily angered. Now, what I want to do here is I want to give you one thing that Paul is not saying with this phrase, love is not easily angered. And then I want to give you two things that Paul is saying. And these are in your message notes. So first, this is what Paul isn't saying. Paul is not saying we should never get angry. It's not what he's saying. Anger is a natural human emotion. It's a God-given emotion. You don't need to feel guilty when you get angry. It's a God-given emotion. You don't need to feel guilty. Now, what we don't do, what we shouldn't do, is allow our anger to lead us into wrong action, to lead us into sin. We acknowledge it. We tame it. We deal with it. We then use it however we can for the glory of God and to help bring God's kingdom to earth. The question isn't, do you get angry? The question is, what are you doing with your anger? See, anger is a fuel. It will either lead us towards disobedience and division and hurting others and blowing up on people and saying words that we would later regret or throwing things at walls or through windows. Or anger will drive us to fighting for justice and unity and peace and reconciliation and wholeness and salvation. The question isn't, do you get angry? The question is, where is your anger driving you? And let's point this out right away. Jesus got angry. There's a passage in Mark chapter 3, and this is in your notes as well. Jesus is teaching in the synagogue, and there's a man with a shriveled hand there. And the religious leaders don't want this man healed on this particular day because this is the Sabbath, and to heal him would mean work, and so you don't do that. So Mark tells us that he, Jesus, looked around at them in anger and deeply distressed at their stubborn hearts. Then he heals the guy. Jesus got angry. There's a passage in John chapter 2 when Jesus goes into the temple and he sees some things going on in the temple that shouldn't be going on in the temple. People aren't using the temple to glorify God. They're using the temple for their own personal gain. So Jesus leaves the temple. He decides to make a whip out of cords, which would have taken a while. So this isn't Jesus immediately responding to the email out of anger and hitting send. This is Jesus thinking for a couple hours what he's going to do. He then goes back into the temple, starts flailing this whip around, drives everyone out, scatters the coins, overturns tables. Jesus got angry. Matthew chapter 23, Jesus says this to the Pharisees: "You snakes, you brood of vipers, how will you escape being condemned to hell?" Happy people don't say things like that. Jesus got angry. Paul got angry in Acts 17. We just talked about that. When he enters Athens and it's full of idols and he's greatly distressed. And this anger, this distress is seen as a good thing. So when we see the student getting bullied at school, or we see our loved one doing things that are harmful for their bodies and unhealthy for their bodies and their soul and their spirit and their well-being, or we learn that 805 million people in the world don't have enough food to eat, or 750 million people in the world don't have access to clean drinking water, that should do something to us. That should provoke us. Love doesn't mean we should never get angry. Love means getting angry at the right things. That's in your notes as well. Love means getting angry at the right things. Something should make you mad. Something should make you mad. The reason Mother Teresa and Martin Luther King Jr. and Nelson Mandela did what they did is because they got angry. They got provoked by something and they did something about it. What Paul isn't saying here is we should never get angry. Now, a couple things I think Paul is saying here. First, Paul is saying we should be slow to anger. We should be slow to anger. There's a passage in Exodus chapter 34 where Moses chisels out some commands on a couple stone tablets. He takes them up on the top of Mount Sinai to meet with God. God comes down to the top of Mount Sinai to meet with Moses, and they're standing side by side, the text says. And then the author says this: "And he," being God, "passed in front of Moses, proclaiming, the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands, and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin." And then throughout the Old Testament, the writers of the Old Testament keep bringing up this line, this phrase. It's like they're reminding us of this character trait of God. So in Numbers chapter 14, Moses is reminding God of who he is when God's people have rebelled. They've turned against God. And Moses says this to God: "Now may the Lord's strength be displayed just as you have declared. The Lord is slow to anger." Like, remember, God, you told me this a while ago. "The Lord is slow to anger, abounding in love, and forgiving sin and rebellion." Then Psalm chapter 86. This is a prayer of David. "But you, Lord, are a compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness." And David actually says that 2 more times throughout the Psalms. Then Joel chapter 2. Joel is imploring God's people to repent and return to God. And Joel says this: "Return to the Lord your God, for he is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and abounding in love, and he relents from sending calamity." And then the scriptures teach us that we're supposed to follow in God's footsteps with this character trait. We're supposed to be slow to anger. Proverbs chapter 16, this is from the New American Standard. "He," or she, "who is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he," or she, "who rules his or her spirit than he who captures a city." Then the New Testament, James in chapter 1 says this: "My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires." Now, one of the questions that can be raised in us as we talk about this is, okay, slow to anger, great. Like, how do I know if I'm slow to anger? And here's a way. C.S. Lewis, in his book Mere Christianity, talks about how the best evidence of who you are when it comes to anger is how you react when you're taken off guard. Is how you react when you're surprised by something. And he says this: "If there are rats in a cellar, you are most likely to see them if you go in very suddenly. But the suddenness does not create the rats. or in this case, the anger, it only prevents them from hiding. In the same way, the suddenness of the provocation does not make me an ill-tempered man. It only shows me what an ill-tempered man I am. The rats are always there in the cellar, but if you go in shouting and noisily, they will have taken cover before you switch on the light. When's the last time you were taken off your guard? When's the last time you were surprised by something? And it wasn't necessarily a good surprise. You got bad news at work. You didn't get the job you wanted. You found out your child stole from you or lied to you or broke one of your guidelines for them. Your flight got canceled. How did you react? How did you respond? Were you angry? Were you provoked? Did you yell at someone? Did you call someone a name? Did you say something you regretted saying later? Did you blow up in someone's face? Did you try to seek revenge? Or were you calm? Were you filled with grace and with peace? And that can be a pretty good indicator of how much we need to work on our anger. And let's point this out. We're all provoked by something. We're all tempted by something. And for some of us in this room, anger, honestly, was never something that we had to deal with much. It just, like, we have our issues, that just hasn't been one of them. But for others of us, anger and our temper, that's been like the thing we've had to work the hardest on over the years in order to be a whole, healthy person, in order to be a whole, healthy follower of God. So as we talk about anger, let's remember there are people who need extra grace when it comes to this conversation. But Paul says we should be slow to anger. I mean, here's what Paul says. Love is steady. This is what we're going for. A steady love. Love is durable. Love is consistent. Love is predictable. Love is stable. Love is reliable. Love is not all over the map emotionally because circumstances change. Love is slow to anger. And one thing we need to point out, love knows how to apologize. This is in your notes as well. Because we do get angry. We do get angry, perhaps at things we shouldn't have gotten angry at. We're human. But what love knows how to do is apologize. Love knows how to say, I'm sorry, over and over and over again. And sometimes we think apologizing is a sign of weakness because we're admitting we've done something wrong. But apologizing is actually a sign of maturity. It's a sign of strength. Love knows how to apologize. So first, love is slow to anger. Second, I think Paul is saying this. We should be quick to let anger go. We should be quick to let anger go. This passage in Ephesians chapter 4 where Paul's writing to the Christians, the church in Ephesus, and Paul says this. In your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry, and do not give the devil a foothold. And I've talked to people who have gotten angry in the evening, and they're still angry when it gets dark outside, or when they go to bed. And they wonder, like, am I sinning? Am I going against God? Because Paul says, don't let the sun go down while you're still angry. And like, it's dark and I'm still angry. Like, how literal is this command from Paul? And one of my comments back is, well, what if you get angry on a really cloudy day? And you don't know exactly when the sun has set. So you don't know exactly when you're supposed to release that anger. The point being, I don't think Paul's saying here, if you don't let go of your anger by 8:23 tonight when the sun has officially set. I checked tonight, 8:23. If you're not done being angry by then, you're in trouble. I don't think that's what Paul's saying. I think what Paul is saying is, hey, there's an urgency to this. Let go of your anger as soon as possible. Drop it as soon as possible. Release it as soon as possible. Do what you have to do to let this thing go as soon as possible. Because if you hold on to your anger, what you're doing is you're giving the devil a chance to work in your life through your anger, and you want no part of that. We should be quick to let anger go. And part of being quick to let anger go means this. Love knows how to forgive. Also in your notes. Love knows how to forgive. Love knows how to forgive quickly and freely and well. There's an author named Miroslav Volf, which is just one of the best names to say. And he wrote a book on forgiveness called Free of Charge. This book came out a while ago. And in the book, Miroslav talks about two parts of forgiveness. He says the first part is to call the incident or the action or the offense what it is. It's to say, you did that to me and it hurt and it was wrong and I can't believe you did that and I'm angry and it's going to take me a little bit to get over that. That's the first part, just being honest about what that was. The second part, he says, is to treat that person like they never did that action in the first place. That's the harder part. That could take a bit longer. Call it what it is. And then at some point, you have to treat that person like they'd never do that in the first place. Love knows how to do that. One of my best friends is a guy named Josh. Josh was an elder at my church in Houston. He has worked for the Union Baptist Association for over a decade. There is no one who has more love and integrity than Josh. And a couple years ago, a group of our friends, our wives, started to do something with our children called STEAM Camp. It was a week over the summer. And I had never heard of STEAM Camp at the time, but apparently it's like a thing. And so each day during the week, they teach the kids a certain topic. So STEAM. So one day is science, and then technology, and then engineering, and then art, and then math. STEAM, not just a clever name. And so the wives would take turns doing the teaching. And this last week in Houston, our friends did this with their children. And it was Josh's wife's Valerie. It was her turn to teach early on in the week. And so she planned this cool hike at a nature park and then a snack at the end. And these are like 4 or 5, 6-year-old kids. And so she asked her husband Josh to help. She asked him to pack the snack and take it to the park and drop it off before he went to work. So Josh is home in the morning. He packs 12 silo cups full of berries, puts saran wrap over each individual cup, puts the cups in a muffin tin, and then takes out his cooler and tries to put the muffin tin in the cooler. It doesn't fit his cooler, so he turns his cooler on the side so the muffin tin fits in the cooler, then packs the surrounding area full of ice so the berries stay cool and everything doesn't fall all over the place. He then shuts the cooler, puts a note on the cooler that says, "Open with caution, leave on its side." Josh then takes this cooler to the park, walks through the park, puts it on the picnic table that his wife asked him to put it on. He then goes back to his car and goes home to get ready for work. A couple minutes later, his wife texts him and says, I forgot something, can you please bring it back? He says, of course. So 10, 15 minutes later, Josh is back walking through this park. As he's walking, these 2 park rangers, boom, are like in his face. Ranger Rick, actual name, which is awesome. And Ranger Rick's sidekick, I don't know his name. And they're in his face, and Josh is like, what's going on? He looks over at the cooler and the picnic table, and the cooler and the picnic table are surrounded by yellow caution tape, like crime scene tape. And so Josh doesn't know what's going on, but whatever's going on, like the area is secure, so we got that going for us. And so Park Ranger Rick just like is in his face, and it turns out that after Josh left, a park regular went to these 2 park rangers and said that he saw a suspicious-looking man carrying a suspicious-looking cooler, leaving it on a picnic table. On its side, there's a note on it that says, "Open with caution, leave on its side." And then the man ran back to his SUV and drove off. Josh doesn't own an SUV, but that's besides the point. So when Josh comes back, Ranger Rick and Sidekick are in his face, and Ranger Rick just starts lighting into Josh and yelling at him and swearing at him and saying, "What do you mean by putting my park in danger? Who do you think you are? What's with the cooler? Why is it on his side? Why the note, open with caution?" At this point, the kids are like watching this interaction. They're ready for some STEAM camp, and they're not getting it yet. And so Ranger Rick is just lighting them. Josh is like, "Whoa, Ranger Rick, calm down. Like, did you look in the cooler?" And Ranger Rick said, "No, because I didn't want to die." And Josh says, "Okay, let's go over to the cooler, and I'll open it and show you it's berries, it's snacks." And Ranger Rick says, "You're not opening anything until the cops get here." Josh said, "You called the cops?" Ranger Rick said, I called the bomb squad. So Josh now not only has Ranger Rick on his tail, now Bomb Squad Bob is coming after him. I don't know if that's his name, I just thought that was funny. And Josh is like, what is going on? Thankfully, a couple minutes later, 2 police officers show up. They de-escalate the situation, they calm down Ranger Rick, they talk to Josh, they believe Josh, so they actually kind of laugh about the situation. They open the cooler, they see it's berries and silo cups, and thankfully Josh wasn't arrested or handcuffed or thrown in prison or anything like that. And so I find out about this a couple hours later, and I text Josh, and when I'm texting him, I have the same grin on my face that Glenn had as he was opening the door for me over there. And I just text him, how's your day going? Be careful where you put your coolers, dude. Like, what are you doing? And Josh's response was, I'm still mad. And I said, come on, isn't just like, it didn't happen to me, but it's gotta be a little bit funny. And Josh said, it'll be funny in a while. Like, at some point, this is gonna make for a funny sermon illustration. I said, it might make for a funny illustration in 4 days, because I'm talking about being slow to anger and quick to let it go. And dude, this is funny, like, let this go. He didn't text me back after that comment. But a couple days later, we talked, and he filled in some of the details for me, and we had a good laugh about it. And it's funny because like it could not have happened to a less likely suspect than my friend Josh. But here's why I tell you this story, to ask you this question. What do you need to let go of? What do you need to let go of? And I have 3 questions for you at the end of the message notes. What is it? You've been hanging on to it for a while. And now it's just doing you more harm than good. It's actually hardening your heart now instead of softening your heart, and you just need to let it go. Who do you need to apologize to? Who did you get angry at and you said something you didn't mean? You acted in a way you shouldn't have acted. Who have you hurt, wronged? And it's time to apologize, which isn't a sign of weakness, it's actually a sign of maturity. And then who do you need to forgive? Who got angry at you and did something to you that you didn't appreciate? Who wronged you? Who hurt you? And now it's time to release them of that anger, resentment, bitterness, hatred, whatever the feeling is. Anger. What do you need to let go of? Who do you need to apologize to? Who do you need to forgive? And maybe this week, as we're thinking about how to be slow to anger and quick to let it go, maybe these are the questions that we work through. Love is slow to anger. It's quick to let it go. See, Christian love has learned the arts of letting go and apologizing and forgiving. When I was in 3rd grade, I was sitting in my small group at church. It was a Sunday morning, Willow Creek Community Church in South Barrington, Illinois. And my small group was sitting in a circle. And our small group leader, Steve, was telling us what it meant to have a relationship with Jesus. And the way he phrased it was asking Jesus into your heart. And for the first time in my life that I remember, it was my first time thinking, okay, I think I want that. I don't know what all it means, but I think I want that. And I'm sure my parents had told me hundreds of times before that moment about what it meant to have a relationship with Jesus and follow Jesus. But sometimes it just takes someone who's not your parent to say something for it to click. And that was the moment for me, like, I want that. And so I turn around in the middle of our small group discussion. My back is now facing my small group. I bow my head. I ask Jesus to forgive me for all the things I've done wrong and ask Jesus into my life and into my heart. I then turn back around to face my small group again. It was maybe a 15-second prayer as a 3rd grader. And I just rejoined the conversation like, hey, no big deal, nothing happened. But that was the first moment that I remember intentionally following Jesus. So if you were to ask me, when did your relationship with Jesus start? It was that moment. And I have tested God's character in this area of being not easily angered every single day since that moment in 3rd grade. I've tested God's character in the area of being slow to anger and quick to let it go every single day in multiple ways. And I am so grateful that God is love. And I am so grateful that God is not easily angered, that he's slow to anger, that he's quick to let it go, because if he weren't, I would be in huge trouble. There's a guy named Darren Hufford who wrote a book called The God's Honest Truth. And in the book, he deals with this passage on not being easily angered. And Darren says this about love. He says, love does not remove irritants from our lives or reduce irritability by forbidding anger. Rather, it enables us to respond differently to enraging circumstances, reduces the potential for frustration, gives us the power to communicate anger appropriately, and increases our gratitude for the way God has worked in our lives. Aren't you grateful for the way God has worked in your life? And Crossroads, may we show others the same kind of steady love that God has shown each of us. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for this morning. We thank you for this chapter, this series, Summer of Love, 1 Corinthians 13. God, as we think about being not easily angered, being slow to anger and quick to let it go, may you work in each of our hearts where we need you to work in our hearts. May you show us what we need to let go of, who we need to apologize to, who we need to forgive. May you teach us every single day how to be more like you in this area, and may we give you all the glory. In Jesus' name, everybody said, amen.